Hello, I'm Mara Purl, and this is Novel Conversations. I'm an author, and today I have two wonderful author guests joining me. One is a fellow American and fellow California author, Lida Sideris, and the other is an author from New Zealand, Kirstin McKenzie. So I am intrigued by both of you, and it's really fun to be together. Thank you so much for joining me. One of the reasons that I paired the two of you is both of you are using previous careers to enrich what you're writing about. And also, you both are have worked in law enforcement or legal careers, which are, kind of fascinating and very much enrich what you're writing. I'm in the middle of one of Lida's books and one of Kirstin's books. And so I'm on the horns of a dilemma because I have to know what happens. So I'm engrossed right now in both of your writing. So I want to ask each of you to brag a little bit about your work and what you do, and then let's dive in a little bit to your sort of fascinating backgrounds. Lida, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, I did base my books, my series, especially my first book, on my former life working as a movie studio attorney, just like my heroine, except without the homicides. And I did that because I wanted to write a mystery. That's what I love to read, but I didn't know where to begin. So I took the adage, write what you know, and that's what I did. So my first draft was autobiographical and so incredibly boring and dull. So I had to redo it and make my heroine as unlike me as possible. And that's when I began having a lot of fun because I gave her a different background. She's the daughter of a late great PI, and together they cracked some high profile cases. So she's got some skills, and that's what makes it really fun for me.
Oh, excellent. And Kirsten, what about you?
So my background is as a former customs officer, both in New Zealand and based at Heathrow in London. And then I returned from London. My father unfortunately passed away quite suddenly, and so my brother and I took over the family antique store. And I don't know if you've ever been shopping for antiques in winter, but here in New Zealand, nobody does. So it was a very quiet day at work. And I said to my brother, "Oh, I'm going to write a book." And he said to me, "Well, you never finish anything." And I was like,
Oh,
I don't know if you have a younger brother, but that was a challenge. And so um, my first book was almost a homage to my father, because in that first book, the girl's father goes missing and she's traveling through the antiquities in her shop to try and find her father. So it's not technically autobiographical, but there's a bit of me in there wishing I could find my father.
oh, that's very interesting. And what an emotional hook. That's interesting because I am reading that book, and I really find that's the through line. That's the emotional through line.
Thank
So
you.
that's kind of lovely. Kirsten, you and I discovered something when we were first connecting, and that is Vindalanda.
Oh, yes.
So a couple of years ago, my husband and I were traveling around the UK, and we had always wanted to go to Hadrian's Wall, which we did. And when we were there, we heard about this ancient Roman city that is still being excavated. So we went there, had an amazing day, found out you could volunteer to help with excavation. And Lida, what this looks like is you get a wheelbarrow of dirt. You take it to the lab, and then, people are going through it carefully, carefully to see if there's anything in the dirt. Well, one of the most incredible things they've discovered so far is a letter written in the year 100 AD, I think. And it's a birthday invitation written
Wow.
by a woman to a neighbor on behalf of her little child. And it just makes you feel it all came alive. those people really were here. Well, I found out that Kirstin is somebody who actually volunteers at Vindalanda. So I thought, oh, fantastic. So I have to ask you about that.
So yeah, every year I trek, 15,000 kilometers and go and volunteer at Vindalanda for 2 weeks. And I spend 2 weeks digging in soil. And it is honestly the best 2 weeks of my life every year. And I have found a couple of those ink writing tablets in my time. And at one stage, the BBC was there recording when we found one, and you can't see me on camera, but you can hear my voice cracking as I'm explaining to the cameraman just the sheer emotion that I was feeling at that time. And so I've written a portion of that into my second series because the more I write in that world, the more I get to go there. So
Ah,
yeah.
the method to your madness. Oh,
Yes.
it's so interesting. Well, both of you really do some digging.
Well played.
And metaphorically to unearth these sort of treasures of understanding the people in your story and understanding the motivation behind why a crime is committed, what people are up to. Are they desperate or are they just madly ambitious? All those things come into play. So let me ask each of you, how do you view the line, let's say, between fact and fiction? We all are writing fiction, but obviously it's based on research and lived experience. I mean, where do you feel it's critical to stick to factual information, and how much license do you take in creating the fictional aspects? Lida, go to you first.
Well, because I write lighthearted mysteries, I do take a lot of artistic license because I just want to have fun with what I'm writing. But at the same time, I want it to be very logical for the reader. So, as you both probably know, we do mounds of research and use a fraction of that because there's just so much out there. But it's enough, I hope, to make my books appear real. And I know that it does work because I've received emails from readers asking, well, how could that happen? I couldn't believe it. And they really were drawn in thinking that this was like something that really took place. So I figured, I guess it's working. But with my latest book, which is Murderous Means, number 6 in my series, I got the idea from something that actually happened. The matriarch of a large family died suddenly in her sleep. She was 72, but she was fit, and it was ruled just a natural death. And so, of course, with the minds that we have, I was thinking, well, obviously, this could not have been a natural death. And so that's what started, that was the seed for my latest book. And I took it much farther. And of course, in my book, it was not a natural death because it couldn't be. But so there is some fact, but it's mostly fiction because I want to have fun with it.
Okay. Kirstin?
Yeah. I draw on things that have actually happened, but I'm not talking about something major like the assassination of John Lennon or anything like that. We have a resource here called Papers Past, which is all the old newspapers which have been digitized. And so I'll say, I want something that happened in Auckland on Queen Street in 1864. And it'll bring me up a bar fight that spilled over onto the road and a window was broken. And that's enough for me to create something out of a minor infraction that happened, over 100 years ago. And in 15 Postcards, which is the first book in my first trilogy, I did put an author note in because I did move quite an important fight in India during the rebellion 500 miles closer. But that was, the battle itself isn't important. It's for my protagonist to hear what's going on and to see the fires that are happening. So I apologize to my readers for moving it 500 miles closer. So.
But that's the kind of license that we have to take sometimes. And I did find that's a very interesting story point, Lida. The woman who dies, it seems somebody who's healthy and not particularly old, that it's a very logical, as you said, assumption that all is not exactly well in that situation. And Kirstin, I haven't finished that book yet, but I'm fascinated by the various places, the sudden trip to New Zealand, of course, I loved. That happens. Her characters, when she touches something in the antique shop, she never knows when or where she may be transported, and
Oh.
suddenly is in a new location and a new time period, having to deal with exigencies she couldn't have imagined. And the India section was brutal, and accurate. It's been many years since I traveled to India, but oh boy, a lot was brought back by what you wrote. You know, I don't think I've ever really shared this before, but this conversation is bringing to mind something that happened within my story writing. So I started the Milford Haven novels began as a radio drama, and I had a wonderful cast of fellow professional actors in Los Angeles. I was working as an actress on Days of Our Lives, and other cast members in my show were on different shows. And um, I had an actress playing a character named Kirstin, who was a journalist. And part of the way through our season of recording, the actress passed away.
Mm.
And, when that happens, there are two responses. If you're on a show like Days of Our Lives, they just replace you, frankly. And they make up reasons why you're suddenly 6 inches taller and have blonde hair, but I didn't feel I could do that. And so I had to look at something happening to my character. And it was very hard to do, but I have my character run into a terrible mishap. And I had to think about why. And this keyed into a whole theme in my series, which I call the journey from head to heart. So I looked at our societies. We tend to favor logic and ignore intuition. But what I wanted to put forward was intuition offers us equally valuable information. We would be smarter, we would do better to learn to pay attention to both. Well, Kirstin was somebody who overrode her intuition. Her intuition told her, don't go to that meeting late at night by yourself at an unfinished house. Don't go, don't go. But she went anyway. And so this has led to an offshoot from my series where I'm actually writing a paranormal storyline for Kirstin. And I generally write women's fiction. So some of my women's fiction readers were like, ooh, that's scary. I don't want to read that. And I'm like, you don't have to. Just stay with the main storyline. You don't have to swim in those waters if you don't care to. But I also found a lot of new readers who do enjoy that. And I've had to ask myself some pretty serious questions. What do I really think happens when somebody is killed? So how these lived experiences flow into our stories, really, it's a matter of the head, but it's very much a matter of the heart. And I hear that from both of you. So you also both write about locations that are magnets for tourism. Everyone has New Zealand on their bucket list, it seems. Everybody wants to go there. And the other place everybody wants to go is Hollywood. And those are your two settings. So does that play into your writing or your marketing in any way?
I was I thought I was being very strategic when I set a third of my book in New Zealand. I thought, oh, this will help me get a New Zealand publisher. But in the end, my publisher ended up being in the UK. So that didn't work out so well. With regard to India, that was a place I'd always wanted to visit. And I didn't actually visit India until I was writing my second book. So 15 Postcards was written purely just by using research materials and without having been there. My husband goes there a lot. He's been there, I don't know, over 40 times. But I didn't go there until before my second book. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to travel through Rajasthan and experience life there. And I could soak up the smells and the sights and the nature that was there. But I love traveling through books. I love reading about places that I haven't been to before so that I can go there. I'm such a literary traveler. I went to Cuba to go to Hemingway's house. I just, and I've been to Hollywood, so now I have to read your books.
So what would you say, Lida?
Well, even though she's a movie studio attorney, this is because she paralleled my life in that respect, but I didn't work in Hollywood initially. Actually, I did for my first 2 years, but then I moved to a production arm in Orange County, which is where my heroine starts out in Newport Beach. So I picked places that I love around Southern California and that I know and that I could highlight. Places that possibly everyone has heard of, such as Malibu, Beverly Hills, Santa Barbara. And so I took her there because really it's just the first 3 books that she's beholden to the studio, because her boss is your stereotypical studio boss, because that's kind of like what I had when I was working there. But then she moves off to work for a legendary actress who's away in India filming a documentary. And so she doesn't have to go to the office because no one's watching her. There are people watching her, but she knows how to scoot around them. So she goes to different places, and that makes it, again, fun for me because I know these places so well. So I write them first, and then I revisit them to see, did I capture the sense, the sounds, the magic of that particular place. And book number 2, I think, takes place in Pasadena at a private college that suspiciously resembles Caltech. I'd never been to Caltech, but I went. It was quite an experience because she's doing an investigation in underground tunnels. And so these fictional books open, as you said, Kirstin, whole new worlds to us, even in the places where you supposedly know well. Because the places I've lived, I didn't know they had sea caves. I visited them because of my heroine. She got stuck in one and so on. Anyway, I love when that happens because it turns us into different people. We view the world differently. Now, if we go somewhere, my husband, who was always very sharp at noticing things, guess who's sharper now? And I'll say, did you see that? And I'll describe it in full detail. And he'll say, what? How'd you get all that? But we do that in our books. So now we're doing that in real life. At least that's what I've.
Yeah. Caltech, I have a character who's an astronomer. And I have a good friend who's an astronomer who now is at NASA Ames, which is up Northern California, but he was at Caltech during the Voyager flyby mission, and I got invited.
Oh, wow.
So I sat there with Dr. Lawrence Doyle and Carl Sagan when the first telemetry was coming back from this mission. And, it's not like they had Kodak film that they sent back to Earth. It was a technology we now understand much better, digital technology, but it was fairly new at that point. And so Lawrence's job, and of course my character's job, was to decipher these pixels of information and assign them the correct color and location. And once he did that, a picture emerged of the alignment of the planets, which had really never been seen before. And that became the cover of Newsweek and Time and so forth, because it was almost as startling as seeing the blue ball image of Earth. So again, as you said, Lida, that sense of breakthrough, that sense of trying to communicate with readers, the startlement, the breakthrough, the sense of discovery, how it affects you, how you view everything differently after that. You cannot lose your sense of wonder. And by the way, how extraordinary that another crisscross between you two is India in your story writing. Very cool.
I feel that I've done more research since I started writing books than I did my entire high school,
I agree.
university career. Like, I'm sitting here reading books that I've ordered offline about reading women's diaries from the 1860s. I'm like, I would never have proactively done this much work when I was studying.
Don't you also feel that there's a lot of self-reflection in our fiction? Because I learned things about myself that I didn't know through my character and her behavior, the things she does and doesn't do.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, research that, it's hard to stop. You get engrossed in learning. In my case, I have a character who's a painter who's really a naturalist, and so she studies a species. Well, I thought sea otters. I have to write about sea otters because I'm writing a California coastal story. And I just thought they were awfully cute. Well, no, they're much more. They're an index species, and they were almost hunted to extinction. And then how did they get brought back? And why is it so political what happened to sea otters? And how does that involve the oil companies and the environmentalists and the on and on? And I thought, okay, Purl, you got to actually now write the book. Stop just doing the research. But it is
when that
fascinating.
research gets boiled down to one paragraph. You've spent hours researching, I don't know, the stone formations in Bruce Bay of the west coast of New Zealand to write half a sentence. So
yes, but that half a sentence has the weight of gold, it really contains so much. So would you say there are special terms or colloquialisms or words, phrases, things that are specific to your characters, to your industry that you want to use, but you also don't want to lose the reader, so you have to put them in context and explain them?
Writing in British English creates problems for me when it comes to reviewers who want to criticize my grammar. So now I have a British editor and an American editor. And so my American editor will say, what's a harb? And I'll go, what do you mean, what's a harb? Well, what's a harb? And I say, well, you mean the stovetop? Oh, okay. What's a metal road? They go, oh, it's a gravel road. Oh, okay. So I'm having to fix those all the time, given that my main market is America. So
you don't do different
challenge.
editions, like slightly different covers, like who does that?
Almost
Michael
everybody
Connolly,
else.
mystery writer, he'll do a cover reveal and he'll say, this is the American cover, the Canadian cover, the British cover. And I haven't read, any but the American editions, but I wonder if there's an adjustment of language. But no, there isn't for you. It's one.
Not for me, no. So I've tootled along with that for both my time travel trilogies, my historical time travel. But when it comes to my thrillers, I'm actually now going back and revising them into American English. So
because you have more readers in the US than in the UK?
Because I have more readers, and I'm just getting quite frustrated with complaints about my grammar when it's been through two editors. I'm like, okay, I will just change it to American grammar. So.
Very interesting. Yeah, we speak the same language, but there are subtle differences. I mean, I find it wonderful, having actually traveled in New Zealand, to recognize words and places and phrases. And I just find that to be delightful. I assume I would be enjoying it just as much if I hadn't gone to New Zealand, because I would consider it to be, some education.
Mm-hmm.
But I found, occasionally I'll find a word that I read and I think, gee, I should understand that word, but I'm really not getting what it means in this context.
Yeah.
So do you find that at all, Lida?
Well, it's easy for me to include legal terminology. But before I
Oh.
do, I always think, well, is the reader going to understand this? So, and knowing that my heroine's only 26 years old, so she hasn't had the opportunity to become too articulate. And she's new to this. And so she really, especially in the first book, she doesn't know what she's doing. So I take that into account, as well as the way someone who's 26, which I am not, I'm a little bit past that, how would she speak? And her sidekicks are younger too. Her mother's closer to my age, but so I listen very carefully to how my children speak, to how my interns at work spoke, and I write things down, TV characters, the way they speak. So I try to make it authentic that way. My kids are the biggest help. But the legal terms, I really simplify them because I don't want someone to get bogged down in those. That really slows down the progress. So yeah, that's how I do it. I mean, again, it would be so easy for me to throw those in, but I back off on purpose because I don't want to complicate things for the reader.
I'm not writing historical fiction exactly the way that you are, Kirstin, but my stories are set in the late 90s. And so many things are just the same, and a few major things are very different, like cell phones. Well, we just didn't build our lives around cell phones in the late 90s. So some of my younger readers will say, well, how come she waited at home for the call? Why didn't she just answer her phone? Because there was no such thing. And I have sometimes introduced, like I have a character who's a fashionista. And so she goes to Neiman Marcus, which is a big, snazzy department store, and wants to get Jimmy Choo shoes. And then I thought, but was Jimmy Choo, were his shoes available in 1998? So I went to the library and I found an old Vogue magazine. And I love this kind of synchronicity, and I bet you've both experienced this too. The first time he was mentioned in Vogue happened in the month in which my story was set.
Wow.
So that
That's
meant that
fate.
Cynthia could go to Neiman Marcus and be one of the first, and she would be, one of the first to have those shoes. But then I got complaints from younger readers saying she must be being paid to do product placement because she's doing ads. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to give you the context. I'm trying to give you the settings. And I thought, I think I should write a blog about this, and just explain why we put markers in. It's totally acceptable if it's the 1800s and somebody's wearing petticoats, then you go, yes, that's what they'd be wearing. It's tricky when it's such near history.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
don't think I've been brave enough to write near history. The closest I got was 1966, which was the flood in Florence. And I chose that time and that event purely because there were no cell phones or CCTV. I just wanted to make it easy for myself that nobody was going to see the thefts occurring. I mean, CCTV was starting to come out, and in the book, of course, I had to research CCTV and how clunky it was in those early days and not fit for purpose. So, but I didn't want all that technology getting in the way of my crime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have a story for you. I was once friends with a man named Lucio Manisco, who was the bureau chief for Il Messaggero, a Roman newspaper, and he was in the New York bureau. And he shared this story about that flood in Florence. Is that right? Florence, did you say?
Yeah, that's right.
In Florence. And everyone in the city stopped everything to rescue paintings, sketches, anything they could, to get them up out of the water. And so he and a friend had spent hours doing this. And suddenly his friend said, what about those Da Vinci drawings that were in the basement of such and such a building? And in a panic, they both ran to that building. And he described they were crawling on the floor in about 2 inches of water, feeling paper dissolving.
Oh.
under their hands and just devastated to think that there could be Da Vinci's there. And then suddenly he said, no, I remember, Paolo, he was here and he got them earlier. And so they celebrated by taking a bottle of wine to the top of the hill and toasting the dawn that the Da Vinci's were safe. I just thought, I love that. And I
Yeah,
can't
but
really fit it into any of my books, but perhaps you can.
what if Polo took those Da Vinci's and smuggled them out, and nobody knew he was there, and they thought they'd been lost forever, but actually they're in his briefcase, and now he's sold them at Christie's, and he's bought his own palazzo. And
yes, perfect. You've spun the story exactly as you should. Let me ask you each, what would you say are some of the best things about being an author?
For me, it would be the places you go and the people you meet, because they're all book lovers. Then they're there because they want to see you, they want to hear you. That's such a thrill, such an unexpected thrill. And I was never a person who cared much for public speaking. I always liked to be in the background if I could, but all of a sudden this author door opened everything. Well, I had to public speak, and I found that I enjoyed it so immensely, so much more than I thought was possible. And that was a great thrill because I happened to be in a meeting, not a writing meeting, earlier this morning where we're going to be doing a presentation. And one of the co-leads with me was saying she's terrified of having to speak to these people. And so, I gave her some tips based on what I had learned. But that was just the doors that it opened. And as you both must know, the people in our audience, they're so lovely. I'm always so grateful to hear from them, to be with them. And then the other authors too, we know how supportive other authors are. Another thing to appreciate. So all around, what a wonderful place to be. If I'd known it was like this, I would have started a lot sooner.
Lovely. Kirstin?
I love the freedom that writing full-time gives me. So I'm so fortunate I've loved all three of my careers. I loved being a customs officer immensely. I recommend everybody goes and gets a job there. I loved being an antique dealer. I loved helping people find treasures, connect to their past, find the most beautiful green vase for their table. And I've loved being a writer. I love being able to write in my pajamas, being able to write at the beach, being able to write in the car while I'm sitting at the track, which I do a lot, watching my daughter. It's the freedom, but also, as Lida said, it's the book world. Everybody that comes to a book event is there for the love of books. So what's not to love about that? They're all there because they love reading. And okay, we all love reading different things, but there's enough readers in the world for all of us. So we're not competitors like you would be one furniture store competing with another furniture store. We're not competing with each other because there's enough people that like different books.
Oh, I
That means
totally.
we can make a living from this love.
Yeah, I love the synergy of it. And that's why I love reaching out to fellow authors. It's always fascinating the things we do the same way, the things we do differently. I think one of the favorite things for me about being an author is understanding myself and understanding my niche, my place in the world, accessing my gift, that which I'm supposed to give, and sort of why I'm here. And I think that theme of sort of digging in, I often say I think my characters are unwinding their snarls. And I think all of us, we're going along in life and we come to this big knot. And then what are we going to do about it? Sometimes it isn't time to tackle it, and sometimes it is. So, and my characters are on some sort of a spectrum. Um, my protagonist is morally courageous, and so she steps right up to say, okay, I got to figure this out. And then there are other people in the story who resist this like mad, and you can see the results of that resistance. that many things in their lives haven't worked out because they haven't faced that which they need to face. So it's you find out how you yourself think, which enables you to give your gift. And I think that's amazing. It's amazing that there is such a thing as a career that could offer that. Okay, so what are the worst things about being an author?
I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying, Mara, and add to that that just the miracle of finishing a book. Because you know how many lawyers in particular come up to me and say, you know, you're doing what we all want to do, but just can't seem to do it. And they all want to know, how do you finish it? So it's a miracle every time I reach the end and I'm happy with it. And that brings me to the answer to your question, Mara. What part do I not like as much? And that is writing the first draft. That is always, oh, it's a every moment of writing that I think, oh, you can't do that. This is going to be terrible. No one's going to read this. The last one was much better. It's the whole way. It's like, come on already. So I gave myself a little hack to deal with that I discovered, I think maybe with book 3 or 4. And that is before I start, I always go back to chapter 1 and I rewrite it just so that I can watch it getting better and better. And I tell myself, see, you can do it. Look how this is coming along. All you have to do is do that with the rest of the chapters. So that's my little, I guess, cheat to be able to reach the end. But it doesn't get any easier reaching the end. It's, you know, but when you do, again, what a feeling when you've whipped out that book that you want, you've got the right person who committed the crime, and you know you're set to go.
Yeah, yeah, agree. I so resemble that. You know, I sit down to start a new book and I think, who do I think I am? What makes me think I can possibly write a book? And it's one of the reasons I have what I call the gratitude wall. And I have, you know, like the book covers framed and some of the awards framed. And I look at that and I say, well, there's hope. I did that. That must mean maybe I can do it again. What would you say, Kirstin?
I think for me, for every single one of my books, the hardest point is getting to 35, 40,000 words. And because I don't plot, I get to that point and I am like a deer in headlights and I freeze. And I've done it with every single book. I freeze for maybe a month, maybe 2 months. And then something will happen, something will click, or I'll read a newspaper article and I go, oh, that's how I'm going to resolve it. And I keep thinking, oh, this time I'm going to plot, or this time it won't happen, but I'm writing a new book now. I'm at 31,000 or maybe 32,000 words, and I can feel it. I can feel it coming. Even this morning, as I was prepping this video, making sure my hair looked nice, I'm still thinking, what's going to happen next? How am I ever going to finish this book? I've finished 10 books already. You know I can do it, but every book, this middle bit, and I don't want to call it writer's block because it's my own fault for not plotting it. But
you can't say
maybe
it's a, I mean, you're a pantser rather than a plotter. And there's nothing
maybe
wrong.
it's just my thing. I just need to ruminate on it.
Well, I write that way too, by the seat of my pants, and I enjoy every moment of it because I've tried outlining and plotting, and it became so dull for me. So I just tossed it and wrote the way I wanted. But I was going to say, I happened to freeze with my last book, with my latest book. I was about 40,000 words in. Mine are about 77, 78,000. So I was thinking, oh, I cannot do this. And I just stopped. So what I did was at that point was I wrote a book in a different genre for about a month, about 30,000 words in. I felt re-energized and I went back and I finished my first book.
Oh,
No,
I
good for
didn't do
you.
that before, but it was helpful.
These are very good hacks. These are good things to know. My series is, you know, an adaptation of an existing show to some extent. I mean, I had 100 episodes of the BBC radio drama, and I have a show Bible. I have detailed character descriptions because I have to stay consistent. But the novels have much more depth and detail than could possibly be fit into a radio drama. So I do have kind of an outlining brain, and I have techniques with multicolored post-it notes, that I use that are helpful. On the other hand, if a scene starts to come to me, I go with it. And I could be anywhere doing anything at any time of the day. So I always have either a dictation device or I have a little keyboard with me. And that scene may not be part of an outline before I write it. But I start hearing the characters talking. I listen and I never assume it'll come again. I'm very obedient to the muse. And some of those are the key scenes. It's like, I didn't know Miranda was going to have a conversation with Pilula at that time. And then that adjusts the story. So maybe that makes me a hybrid, plotter, pantser. I'm sort of known as an outliner, but I think secretly I also do some seat of my pants, kind of writing.
You can come into our club with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
What bottom line is, whatever works.
Yes.
I've actually outlined my 5th book, and it did work for me. I did veer off toward the end, but it did work. So whatever works.
Okay, so then we come to the question, would you say your books are character driven or are they plot driven? Again, there's no wrong answer.
Oh, that is a really tricky question because I'm writing in the 2 different genres, the time travel mysteries, and then I've got my paranormal thrillers. I think the paranormal thrillers are more dictated to by what's happening rather than who it's happening to.
Okay.
Whereas my time travel books are definitely, they circle around my main character and a couple of minor characters and what's happening to them and how they're driving it forward. The strangest review I ever got for 15 postcards was, it wasn't a bad review, but the reviewer called Sarah Lester a bubblehead. And it was a review that came very early on. But that reviewer, whoever you are, I love you. That reviewer really made me stop and think what about my character. So from then on, that one reviewer has set me on a much better track. And so for the subsequent books in that series, I'm like, oh, so if she's a bubblehead in book 1, she really has to come to that realization in book 2 that she really was making some poor choices in life. So I want to thank that reviewer, whoever they were back in 2015.
I admire
they really changed my writing.
I admire your humility and your interest in being better and writing better. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's lovely. Lida?
I was just going to say, for me, it's mostly the characters because I never know what they're going to do, and they're a little quirky. And even my latest book is called Murderous Means, and it's about the Means family because they're the ones, the matriarch of the Means family is the one that was possibly snuffed out. So we're going to find out. But so yeah, because my heroine will do one thing, and all of a sudden one of her sidekicks will say, you know what, I'm going to go investigate the ranch house because, there was some weird stuff going on there last night. So she'll go off over there. And I've noticed that the main sidekick to my heroine, Corey, has come into her own a lot more in this book number 6. I love watching them mature and grow because in the first book, my heroine was immature and cocky, and she didn't want help from anyone. But now by book 6, she's very grateful for not only her friends' help, but her mother's help. And her mother, she did not want in the picture for the first 4 books. And all of a sudden the mother has become a sidekick. And I like that because it kind of makes it generational, and she can relate to the Means family who are older. So definitely my characters take the front seat. The plot is there, but it's in the back.
I
Yeah,
love
I
that
sort of,
development of your
yes, that's
character,
excellent.
Lida. Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. I agree. For me, it's the characters are kind of writing the story. They're writing their own story. But I love that development of relationships and getting more mature and recognizing on both of your parts, your characters kind of having aha moments and saying, I can do better with this. And my protagonist, Miranda, uh, she's an artist and she's the only one in her family who is. And so, although she loves her lovely parents and her older sister, they don't get her. They are all in business. And she tries and tries to be what they expect. And she finally realizes that that's not the path for her. And she literally moves away, finds this little town of Milford Haven, moves there, and starts over. So it causes tremendous consternation with the family. Her father is saying, well, she's a hopeless case. She's never going to make any money. She's never going to amount to anything. Her mother is torn, worried about her. So I had an interesting experience. I was invited to speak at a book club in the Central Coast. There's one, this is in Avila, Lida, and they have 3 book clubs, but once a year they all get together and they invite one author. And they said, we'd like you to speak for about 5 hours.
Wow.
I was like, what? And they said, no, no,
No
no.
pressure.
We just mean, it's like a tea and it lasts about 5 hours. It's like, okay, I would think we can handle that. So it was darling. When I got there, they had a clubhouse with, a little fire in the fireplace and books on the shelves. And they all had read at least one of my books. And they asked about, well, what was it that made Miranda move to Milford Haven in the first place? And I had a very detailed answer, but I realized I had not written that. So I went back and wrote a prequel to the series that describes this friction between herself and her sister, this sibling rivalry, and just really digging into it and uncovering what they don't understand about each other and why the father feels as he does, and et cetera, et cetera. And it was very helpful to me in getting to know my characters better.
Mm.
And it made much more sense of the whole series. And now I have a reference point. So when Miranda is doing better and has compassion and has now really a better relationship with her mother, it's because she understands her better. She understands her mother was afraid for her and always just wanted the best for her. She wasn't trying to dampen her spirit, but she was trying to make sure she could go out into the world and be happy and succeed. So that character development is, I find it kind of addictive, not only in my series, but when I find other series like both of yours. That's one of the reasons I enjoy reading them so much. I'm looking for that growth. I think that kind of growth is in a character is super important to me, more than a snappy, twisty plot structure. I'm looking to see, yes, but how has this helped these characters, and what trajectory are they on?
Well, I discovered that my heroine's mother had a secret desire to do PI work. That was news to me. Yeah, of course, my
I
heroine
love
too.
that. Yeah, that's so neat. So, what is your writing process? We've talked about some of this, but do you have a certain place in your house? Do you have a certain time of day that you prefer, or what are the elements that create your writing space?
When I first started writing, both my children were at primary school. So I would faff about on the internet most of the day, and then I'd realize I've got an hour before I had to pick them up from school, and we live in walking distance to school. So I read Chris Fox's book called 5,000 Words an Hour, which is about dictation, but he teaches you how to do writing sprints. And so I know that in 10 minutes, I can write 342 words every time. So I do writing sprints. If I sit down to write, I use Chris Fox's method of writing sprints, and within a 30-minute period in 10-minute blocks, I can do just over 1,000 words. So I don't feel the pressure to have to produce 1,000 words a day because I know I can do it. So when I sit down, it's easy to do 1,000 words. I'm just not very good at sitting down to do it. One daughter's just finished school, one daughter's still at school, and the beauty of this job is that I can volunteer at events, I can go and watch sport activities, I can drive her iPad to school because she's left it at home again. And I allow all those things to get in my way of writing, but I have such a short window to be able to be that mum that can do those things.
Yes.
So I write better at night when it's silent, and that's not often the case in a house.
Well, that's beautiful.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I worked a full-time job during my first 4 books, I would say, maybe 4.5. So it was a little bit more challenging. I would get up at 5 a.m. and write, go to work. During some of my lunch breaks, when I could, I'd go to the library and write. And then at night, usually I was too pooped out, so I wouldn't write. But the weekends, I had no social life. That's all I did, because I was under contract, so I had to get these books out there. But then when I stopped working, well, first there was a pandemic here too, so I had spent more time at home. That made things a little easier. But then I left my lawyer job. But like you said, Kirstin, I found other interests that are so gratifying that I may not be writing as full-time as I could be. I still write, of course, because I still have contracts, but it gave me the flexibility to do other things that I didn't know I was missing. And it's so, it enriches your life with your kids. I mean, I never wrote when my kids were younger because they were my full focus. I couldn't do it, but the discovery again of being on this path of the things that you can do, can't do, want to do, it's really marvelous. It's just so enjoyable, and the flexibility can't be beat.
That's right. And I write, I have my father's, I wish I could show you, my father's old roll top desk that we had to dismantle to bring upstairs. And so I sit here and I write at my father's desk, and he was the antique dealer, well regarded and everything else. And so all my books have that antiquity theme running through them, but I'm channeling him, touching the wood that he's sat at. So
that's so interesting.
Is where I do my writing.
Because I'm sitting at an antique desk too, because my in-laws were completely into antiques. So if you were here to see my room, I have a lot of antiques here. And in my newest book, the home that she goes into in the opening scene is filled with antiques that I know. So,
see, we're best writing friends already.
I love this, all this synergy. That's fantastic. So for me, I grew up in Asia, and my parents spent many, many years. They were in Japan before they had a family, and then returned to Japan when my sister and I came along, and then lived there for another 20 years. So that's where I grew up. And of course, our home was filled with antiques, Asian antiques, and my sister and I have inherited those. So when I got married, it was always sort of a concern. It's like, can you deal with Japanese screens and tables and tansu and hibachi? And luckily for me, he loves them. So so we're fine. But there is that. My dad had this little box. It's a lacquer box. It's black lacquer with gold design, of trees. And then it has a panel that slides up, and behind the panel are drawers. And he always kept money in one of the drawers. And I don't know that he ever really used the money. I feel that it was more a talisman or a symbol that, yes, there is money in the house. It was sort of like an icon. And it's one of the traditions that I carry on. I have that box, and there is always at least $100 bill folded in there. And then if if a different country has beautiful money, of course, I have some yen in that drawer, and I found the money in New Zealand was gorgeous. And I couldn't convert it all back to dollars. So I have some New Zealand money in there with the beautiful designs. And I love that it's sort of a family thing, a treasure. But also, my dad was a fan of my writing, which was such a blessing. We had we sort of had a bad moment a number of years ago. I had been a journalist with the Financial Times of London in the New York bureau, and it was a wonderful job. But then it was time to leave, and I got a job offer from the Associated Press, and I worked for them for a short time. One of the best things I've ever done in my life. I learned so much, and I adore the AP. But it was also time for me not to be a journalist anymore, but to get on really with my own writing. And my dad thought I had lost my mind. And again, it was the fear, it was the worry. And so he became quite withdrawn and sullen, and we didn't have the normal conversations that we had always had. So it was very painful, but I really had to stick to my guns. Then I created Milford Haven, and he started reading it, and he said, "You know what? I see what you're doing." And it all was well, and everything was restored, and then some, because he saw that I had leapt over my own sense of limitation and fear in order to try to fulfill a goal that I had. And so we had then a better relationship than ever. And somehow, although that doesn't have to do with this special box, all I have to do is just look at that box. And a lot of this is present again. And I'm grateful for that. How that shows up, it's kind of what you said, Kirstin, where, you have months of research and it shows up as in one paragraph. This is years of lived experience, and I'm not even sure that it really shows up in the novels. And yet it is lived experience and it is authentic.
It would flow through your words, and I think your readers, they might not see those precise words like, "I love my father, he had this magic box."
Yeah.
Those aren't the words that your readers are reading. Your readers are reading those emotions that are flowing through your novel.
Yes.
And how she treats an older man that she perhaps encounters. It's those tiny moments.
Yes, that's
and
true.
That's what's coming through your lived experience, and that then your reader puts their own emotion and their own lived experience.
Yes.
Oh, they overlay that over what they're reading. That's the difference between a book and a movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I always have found it interesting that the root word of author and authentic is the same. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about your audios. Kirstin, I very much admire your audio narrator. I think she's doing a marvelous job with multiple accents. It's lovely. I think it really enhances, what you wrote. And Lida, I listened to the sample of one of your books, but are you on Audible?
I am not.
Okay.
No.
But you will be, right?
I would like to be, yes.
Yeah. I think audio, I'm sure we all have not only readers, but also listeners, people who may be commuters or for whatever reason they prefer, it's easier for them to deal with audio. And it can be a very rich thing if you have a good narrator.
I was very lucky that Podium approached me about the 15 postcards books. And they found the narrator. And when they first approached me, you know how we authors, we're always scared of getting scammed. And I was like, who's this Podium Audio company? It only took a few clicks of the button to work out that they had produced Andy Weir's The Martian well before Matt Damon was on Mars. So,
right.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, sure, you can have the rights to my books. Thanks.
Good. Very good. I'm coming out of radio drama, so I'm narrating my own.
Oh, great.
Of course, you would be amazing.
Well, thank you. It's a neat challenge. I sometimes invite one other actor to take one of the parts. if I feel that that will, really enhance the story. And I also occasionally bring in a couple of sound effects. I guess I can't quite give up, radio drama. But
Can I,
whatever will further the story for the reader, the listener.
Mara, can I ask, is the sound, I know the British do it, the sound effect of the crying raven, the crying crow, is that a sound effect that you would use? I think I hear it in every single British drama. It's like an inside joke thing.
Oh, that's funny. I think the joke we have is that there's only one door in all of Hollywood, and you can hear it on every film, every television show,
Yeah.
and every radio drama. Kaslam! And it was recorded in 1941, and everyone still uses it.
I love these inside jokes. I love reading Easter eggs in books. I always try and write in a little something from one of my other books, that like a character reference or the name of a pub or the name of a book by one of my friends. Like rather than saying, oh, they're reading Stephen King's The Stand, I'll say, oh, they're reading Paul Cleave's The Cleaner. I just, it's my
Absolutely.
world, so I want to
Yeah,
throw
why
those
not?
in.
Why
Yeah.
not? And some of my author friends are writing collectively. They'll do story collections with some sort of shared reality, which we could think about. We could choose a location and each of us have one of our characters go there.
Oh, an
Why
idea.
not? Yeah, yeah.
Fun.
So tell us where people can find your wonderful books.
Oh, I can be found on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, all the usual online outlets, my website, many libraries. If your bookstore or library doesn't have it, you're welcome to request it. I know they can bring it in. So anywhere you like, I think you can find my books. Anywhere in the world.
And we're going to post end cards that show your websites and your social media at the end of the video.
Thank you.
Anything you want to add to that, Kirstin?
Yeah, I do wish more readers would know that they could just ask their library to order our books in either paperback or ebook or audiobook. Obviously, I love people buying my books online, but I also equally love people getting my books from the library.
Oh, yeah.
And the libraries can buy anywhere in the world. You don't have to be in New Zealand or in America. You can, if you're in a library, if you want to go to a library in Germany, you can just ask them to order the book in. I love that because I lived at the library when I was little. So
Oh, same here. I adore libraries. I know Lida does too. She and I did an event together at the Santa Maria Library a few months ago, and
all right.
anything we can do to support libraries, we always do. My husband and I stopped in at the Waiheke Library when we were in
Yes.
England, and I
My
had
friend designed that library.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah,
It's a small world. You know the architect.
Yes. So now I'm in touch with two of the librarians there, and they will watch this video, I believe, because they know that I'm including New Zealand authors in this, in this set of conversations. And let's see. Oh, and Tea Now Library also has now some of my books because we were kayaking on the Milford Sound. Oh, glorious. One of my bucket list things in life. It's fabulous. So libraries are so important, and independent bookstores, again, Lida and I have been doing a really fun thing. Maybe this would work in your area. Tell me where you live, Kirstin, exactly.
Oh, I live in Auckland, so
yeah.
We're quite well serviced with the independent bookshops here.
Well, so there are a couple in the Central Coast that we're determined shall not have to close. And so I created this thing called book drama. And instead of authors, sort of sitting there and reading out a chapter, we slightly rewrite a couple of scenes from our books and configure them into scripts. And then we actually perform them, and we have a couple of professional actors who join us. And it is so much fun. People come, we serve a little bit of food, and we have sort of an event, and we have one coming up actually May 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we do it a couple of times a year, and it is a service, to our community and to the indie bookstores. And then we also do Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble has been very, very supportive of some of my signings and author groups. So any place that people are coming to find books, we want to be there.
Well, you can get my books at Barnes and Noble as well. So, and on all the usual ebook platforms, Amazon, Kobo, all the Draft to Digital, Smashwords, all of the above.
Well, thank you both so very much. This is so much fun. I'm going to enjoy finishing both of your books, after which I will write to you about them. And let's stay in touch. Let's follow each other on social media and read each other's newsletters and just see what other synergy, we can create. And I wish you both just marvelous ongoing success with your excellent writing.
Thank you so much, Mara, for hosting us. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for hosting us, and it was so lovely to meet you, Lida.
You too, Kirstin. Yes.